All right. So today we are going to talk about plant propagation. I think there's probably quite a few master gardeners on here. A lot of you probably already know about plant propagation, but not everybody knows everything. Not even me. I sometimes laugh because I'm supposed to be the expert up here, and sometimes I'm not the expert. There's other people that are way more intuitive and know all about this stuff than I do. I do a good bit of this. I kind of gave up gardening this year because it's been so dry, and it's just kind of sad because I just don't have enough energy to go water after a long day. But it's still here in my heart, and when the weather decides it's going to take a turn and be better, I probably will resume my gardening activities. So, um, types of plant propagation. So there's a couple different ways. We're just going to dive right in. We only have an hour. I like to talk, so let's hope that I don't run out of time before I, end up at 1 o'clock. But if I do and I run a little bit long, if you need to go, that's fine. This is being recorded, so you can always catch up on the stuff that you missed later on. So there's two types of plant propagation. There's seed or sexual propagation and vegetatively or asexual propagation. Um, Basically, just think of seed or vegetatively. So that seed is going to carry genes from both parents. And I do have a seed saving presentation that I do from time to time. And that goes a little bit into that, and that will touch on some things that you see here. I'm not going to get too heavy into the genetics of it. That can really make all of our eyes roll into the back of our heads, and we don't want to do that. So I'm just going to lightly touch on it. So when both parents are going to come from the same species, that offspring will resemble that species. If a parent or if the parents belong to two different species, then that offspring is going to be a mixture of species, like summer squash and pumpkin. The easiest way to tell you what that is think of a mule. I know that's an animal, a mammal, but that's the easiest way. So you have a horse and you have a donkey, and that mule is going to be a mix of both of those. Um, and sometimes those hybrids are actually sterile. A lot of times mules are going to be sterile. But a lot of times seeds are actually sterile. If you think about like a seedless watermelon, that particular watermelon, most of the seeds that are in there are not viable. So a certain percentage are going to be viable or unviable, and then the rest are not viable, meaning they can't produce, they're not going to germinate, that kind of thing, if that helps. Vegetative propagation is done by taking a section of a particular plant, and you're going to take that and generate a clone. The easiest thing I can think of to tell you about that would be, for instance, Japanese maples. There are a lot of really awesome named Japanese maples out there. The way they get those is they graft a cutting onto rootstock. So they're going to get probably a seedling, and they're going to graft that rootstock of that seedling, which usually has fairly vigorous growth. They're going to graft that known branch from that particular named variety, like Bloodgood or something, onto that rootstock. And then that's how you get a clone. And you can do that with tomatoes. You can do that with all sorts of things where you're grafting onto there. So seed dormancy. Non-dormant seeds, those are going to germinate readily. And dormant seeds, they're viable, but they do not automatically germinate. So those kinds of seeds are going to be regulated by the environment. So things like moisture, temperature, oxygen, light, and scarification. Those are all very important in dormant seeds. A good example would be out west, you have some types of conifers, pine trees essentially, that need fire. They need to have that fire to scarify or awaken that seed so that it can actually grow. We don't have anything out here that I'm aware of, but out there, fire is part of the bio. It's a necessary a necessary evil, if you will. I know there's a lot of instances where they try to control the fires, and in doing so, you end up with a buildup of woody debris. You also end up not being able to allow some of these species to germinate. So controlled burns are important in certain ecosystems. Not so much out here, but again, out west, it is important. So that's just an example. Seed and plant dormancy. Okay, so dormancy is the condition in which seeds are not going to germinate, even when most of the conditions, the environmental conditions they need, are favorable. And as I just mentioned, with that particular species, the lodgepole pines out west, sorry, I couldn't think of that particular species name, they need the fire to kind of crack that seed coat. Smoke, so in Australia, you might have they need that particular molecule found in smoke to break that seed dormancy. And digestive enzymes. This is my favorite. Many plants use animals to disperse seeds and break that protective seed coat. So there's actually a coffee bean that goes through the digestive tract of a little, I think it's a cat, a civet cat. It goes through the digestive tract of the civet, and it's collected in the civet poop and then extracted or cleaned, and then they make coffee from that. And that is really expensive coffee. It is. It's very expensive. I won't drink that because of where I know it's been. But that's just an example. So advantages of seed dormancy. So seed dormancy is going to be nature's way of kind of setting a time clock. And it's going to allow those seeds to start their germination process when those favorable conditions, that moisture, the smoke, the heat, whatever is necessary that's going to be favorable for those seedlings that you're going to have. So many trees and shrubs are going to have dormant seeds, so they can just sit there indefinitely for a period of time until those conditions are met. I can think of one good one from the Pacific Northwest. So, there's a lot of logging that goes on over there, and you'll have foxglove, and they have a really dense seed bed. Well, they need a specific amount of light in order to germinate. And what happens when you have a dense tree stand or monoculture of trees? There's not enough light, right? So it may be 60 years and none of those seeds germinate. But as soon as they go in and they log and they remove those trees and those seeds get that light, they're able to germinate. So you have 60-year-old seeds that are germinating, and they're part of the first succession in those slash pines and the other types of pine forests out there. You'll see after they go through and log all of those trees that all these beautiful foxgloves that pop up, and it's really pretty, and you'll see them and they'll seed out and then they'll go back in and replant. But that's kind of interesting. But anyway, that's going to create a seed bank, what I was just talking about. You also have birds that are going to go in and disperse those seeds, and you'll get the synchronized germination with seasons. So these are examples of seed treatments, dogwoods, golden rain trees, and I'm not going to go into all of these, but red buds, but this is how you're going to treat those seeds if you want to germinate them. So short of just going out and discovering a red bud seedling, which honestly, I have plenty of in my yard. So if you would like some, I'm happy to help you out with that. But this tells you what you need to do if you want to germinate those seeds. Non-dormant seeds. So seed germination of non-dormant seeds is pretty easy. As long as their requirements, the minimum requirements are met for air moisture and temperature, they're going to germinate. So this is just a short list. You can get your flowering plants like your herbs, shrubs, vegetables like spinach, quinoa, ornamentals like asters, daisies, sunflower, brassicas, a lot of your vegetable plants, cabbages, broccolis, let's see, bromeliads in the Bromeliaceae family, like pineapples, Spanish moss, and moving on down, Fagaceae, beeches, chestnuts, oaks, little acorns, all of these. And as long as their conditions are met, they will germinate. So light requirements for germination. And this is just a sampling of some of the plants and what they need, light or dark. So the number of hours of light or dark. I apologize on this one. I didn't see that the dark got smushed. Larkspur, vinca, zinnias, that kind of stuff. They have specific light requirements. So this just kind of tells you whether it is the number of light hours or dark hours. So this is ferns, and you can see here, you've got a leatherleaf fern and a bird nest fern, and you can see the non-ripe spores versus the ripe spores. So, you know, spores on these things are kind of neat. I don't know very many people that actually try to propagate ferns. It can be fairly easy as long as the conditions are met and you have the ripe spores. Sometimes they just pop up in moist areas, like around like for your HVAC unit where it's dripping out of the supply line. They just pop up there. So if you have them somewhere on your property, you may, as long as the conditions are met, you will have some new ferns, but you can certainly go and try to do that yourself. It's actually kind of fun, and there are quite a few people. I think that would be a good workshop, how to germinate or propagation of ferns, just an aside. So the science behind vegetative propagation. In this case, you're going to put that plant part under conditions that are favorable for rooting, obviously. I repeat a lot because I want people to integrate that into your brain. And the size of that plant part can vary from large, like the whole mature plant, to small, like a piece of a leaf. So here we have just a potato, and you can see the eye bud there. And a lot of times you can either use the whole potato, or sometimes people will cut the sections out of the potato. But that vegetative plant part has to develop its own roots for the water and mineral absorption. So you have to make sure that you have the correct plant part. You can also use adventitious roots. So here you can see on the stem, let's see, yeah, there we go. So you can see the stem of the plant, and you can see the adventitious roots that are kind of jutting out on the sides here. The big ropey white roots and the other roots there, those are adventitious roots. So those are going to be the aerial plant parts. They're going to be on the parts that are above ground. They can be on underground stems. For instance, the one that probably everybody's most familiar with, tomatoes. So those little lumpy, bumpy protrusions on that tomato stem, those are all adventitious roots. So sometimes people, to get a nice strong root stand, will actually lay those tomatoes flat in a trough and then cover them with soil, pinch off all the leaves and lay them flat. And that way you get a really nice, strong root stand on that tomato. Sometimes people will just pinch those leaves off and plant them deeper, and those adventitious roots will then root. So, but there are a lot of plants that have these. Monstera, a lot of house plants will have them. They climb up trees. So, what else? A lot of natives do too. Virginia creepers, one, poison ivy, stuff like that. So two types of adventitious roots. You'll have the preformed types, like tomatoes. Those are known preformed adventitious roots. And then wound-induced adventitious roots. So this is where you would go in and help them along, encourage them. So you can use plant growth substances like hormones to kind of encourage them to form. And so it's going to require a plant hormone, either the plant's natural hormones or the synthetic ones that we have in the like Rutone. I have a little bowl, a little bit here. Somebody took it. There we go. Every gardener has some of this. Don't dip it in the container. You're always going to want to set it off to the side. But So root promoting hormones are going to be present in those buds, but you can use a synthetic hormone to promote those rooting chemicals and stimulate that adventitious root formation. So there's all sorts of different brands that are out there. I don't have a particular favorite one. Sometimes uh, this is just Take Root, but there's all sorts of different ones out there. You can get them just about anywhere. Even Home Depot has them now. So adventitious buds, these succulents are easy to show that. This is going to be the vegetative propagation, and that is probably, to me anyway, the most fun and easy to get a new plant. These are little called plantlets, and while some plants are propagated from leaf cuttings, you can see that succulent over on the left. That one, a leaf just fell down onto the soil. And as long as that soil is nice and moist, you'll start with the little leaf and you'll get a little plantlet that forms at the end of that leaf. And then you get a brand new plant. And then there's plants like the mother of thousands. I call it the mother of millions because we have several around the office here, and I swear these things they're going to drop them all and they're going to like start rooting in the carpet. And it's a little scary. I've got one not too far away, but it's loaded. It looks like that. I've seen them in Mexico where you have a plant and it's just absolutely loaded. There probably are a million of these little babies on there, but every single one of those, and you can see the little plantlets on the ends of the leaves, when that falls, and sometimes they'll actually start to develop roots on the end before they even fall. When that falls, those roots will then grow into whatever substrate you have there. And so they're very effective at propagation. But other things would be like banana trees with their pups and bamboo with the underground rhizomes. Methods of vegetative propagation. So this is a replica of the parent plant. And so you've got the plantlets like what we just showed you. Those little mother of thousands has used plantlets, and then of course divisions, layering. These are all different methods: root cuttings, shoot cuttings, which include tip cuttings, stem cuttings, and leaf cuttings. Just as a kind of a side note here, you see this picture, you've got some different colored flowers on this particular African violet. And so sometimes when a parent plant contains tissues and cells that have a slightly different genetic makeup called a chimera, that plant that's generated from that tissue might look different from the parent plant. In this case, you've got purple flowers and violet flowers. You might have some striped flowers. And that's because it contains cells within that plant that has a different genetic makeup. And sometimes, on those detective shows on TV, you hear about that also, because, so-and-so killed so-and-so and they had a secret twin or something like that. So you could think of it like that if you want to make it more exciting. So one of the simplest vegetative propagation techniques involves the plantlets from the mother plant. So obviously you saw in that mother of thousands. By the way, if you want one, come to the office. We have them. We have a lot of them. Is that plantlet from the mother plant. So those plantlets are going to be miniature, but they're going to look almost identical to the parent plant. So we also call them runners or suckers. And one that almost everybody will think about is a strawberry plant. So you would plant them out in your garden, and then that parent plant will send out those runners, and those runners will then root, and then you have another plant. And then after that grows to a certain size, sometimes people will sever the connection and you have another plant. You can see those two pots down there. So somebody has taken and put that runner into a pot so that it can root nicely in that medium, that potting medium. But any size plantlet is going to grow roots pretty quickly and develop into a mature size plant. So house plants, this is a spider plant, a favorite of mine. I love these things. They're very easy to root. They already have the roots growing. You basically take them and put them in a pot. They will root up pretty quickly. I mean, how many of us have walked around Lowe's or Home Depot and seen one on the ground and go, oh no, I can't let that die. And you pick that up and put it in your pocket? I think I'm probably guilty. I'm sure a lot of you are also. But they're going to form roots while they're still attached to that mother plant, as you can see there, those adventitious roots. So the way you go about doing that is you are going to place that little plantlet into a potting mix, make sure that those roots and the bottom is surrounded in that soil, and keep it moist. It does not take very long at all. So if you had that huge spider plant like you saw in that last slide, you could make a bazillion babies. So maybe that was the mother of millions. But yeah, that was a very healthy spider plant. Another one that grows by runners. This is a strawberry geranium, saxifragia. So it's a pretty little plant. I think a few people in this office here have some of these, and they root up really nice, very easily, no problems at all. Divisions. So this is yarrow, a nice garden plant. I have some at my house up in Rabun County. It was out of control this year, which is weird because had no rain whatsoever hardly, and normally it just kind of sits there and it doesn't really grow, but it got out of control. I know it doesn't like really super wet, so maybe the conditions were just perfect. Anyway, it's one of the easiest methods for plant propagation. We do, this kind of division splitting or plant splitting in a whole bunch of different herbaceous plants. I mean, hostas, yarrow, daisies, Shasta daisies. I mean, just name a perennial and you probably are doing divisions on this. So the best time to divide your plants is going to be either in spring or fall. Don't do it in the summer. It stresses the plant out, not to mention the fact that it looks really ratty all summer long, and it's going to not look its best. So do it either while it's barely emerging or after the vegetation starts to look kind of bad in the fall and when it's dying. So a rule to follow, the rule of thumb, I need to put a thumb on here, is divide those early blooming species in the fall and late blooming species in the spring. So if it blooms later in the summertime, then you can go ahead and divide it in the spring. And if it's bloomed somewhere in say May or April, go ahead and do that in the fall. Some examples are bearded iris. You can see that little rhizome up there. Divide that in July or September. Poppies and lilies, when that foliage becomes yellow and starts to die back. Primrose, after the flowers fade, before the growth kind of really starts. And then houseplants, divide them in the spring when the growth is about to start. Layering. So layering is a method of propagation where those adventitious roots that you see is kind of prompted when it's still attached to the parent plant. So you haven't plucked it off or anything like that. And there's two methods of layering commonly used to propagate ornamental plants. So you can air layer, and you see here on the left, you have a house plant, and they've taken some type of sphagnum moss, probably. You soak that in water to get that nice and moist, and then they've just taken some saran wrap and wrapped that around there, and then used some string to tie that off. And so that moist contact with that moss is going to cause that plant to start growing those adventitious roots into that sphagnum moss. And then when you have a nice root ball and see it's clear, so you can see that, then you just snip it off. You remove that top part, and then you can pop that up. They also make these really nice plastic ones that you can get. They just snap together. One side's clear, one side's black, and that's for outside. So if you have, say, maybe a hydrangea or something that you want to, what you would normally ground layer, which that's the other way of going about layering. If you don't want to do that because maybe you don't have a really long branch that you could do that with, and you want to just kind of hide it in the hydrangea, then you can use these snap together ones. And they come in a bunch of different sizes. You can get them online. They're cheap. I mean, I think I bought 12 for like $6. So they're a nice option if you don't want to do the ground layering, but have a woodier type plant that you want to do. And but the freest and cheapest way is to take the saran wrap and do that, or the rock. Air layering. So you can do this with the stems of older houseplants. So you have like a dracena here. So let's just say, and I know for a fact these things lose their leaves. The taller they get really bare underneath, and they kind of just don't look good anymore. They look really rough. So here's an option for you if you want to cut it back. So basically, you're just going to keep that top portion and get rid of the leggy stem below that just kind of looks ugly. So fiddle figs, rubber plants, dumb cane, Chinese evergreens, these are all good options for this. Select a branch, and you can see there that somebody's got a knife. You're going to cut that stem on both sides about a third of the way through at a 45-degree angle. Add a toothpick so that that wound doesn't close. And you're going to wrap it. And that will that wound has, remember I said wounding can trigger that growth of adventitious roots. So that's what you're doing. You're wounding that plant. So you're triggering that growth. And you can see here as you go through, you're gonna put a little bit of that rooting, can't see it. There it is, rooting hormone. Wrap it in moss, soak it in water, and put that plastic around there. Or if you want to get one of those plastic snap together contraptions, you can do that rather than just using the saran wrap. And then you just kind of wait. You wait for it to grow roots, and you'll start to see the roots there as that plant multiple weeks, up to 6 weeks, something like that. Some grow faster, some grow slower. And then here's ground layering, an example of that. So you're going to dig, kind of rough up that ground so that you've got bare soil there. And then you're going to have a particular branch. You can see this oak leaf hydrangea. It's got a branch that kind of juts out and looks a little odd. And it's probably one that you would prune off anyway because it's not fitting with the overall shape of the plant. So in this case, hey, why not? Let's get another plant out of that. So you take that low-lying branch and you're going to dig or rough up that soil. Oops. And I think that's it. You're going to then take a toothpick to hold that wound, much like you did on that house plant. Add that rooting hormone in there, and then you're going to place that branch in that trench. I think I mixed my slides up. I apologize for that. It's like, where did that come from? You're going to place that branch in that trench. It'll work whether you wound it or not. It takes a little bit longer if you don't wound it, but it will work if you don't wound it. You can see here. I tried to go through and improve the look of the presentation a little bit. I probably missed that, so I apologize. But you're going to place that branch in there, cover it up with soil, keep it moist, and then put that rock over it to hold it down in there. So make sure your rock is big enough that if you get a little bit of a storm or something that comes ripping through, that it's not going to pull the whole thing out of the soil. The last thing you want to do is to go through all that work to have the whole thing ripped out and flying there with the roots, and they dry up, and then you got to start from scratch. All right, shoot cuttings. So this is how you're going to take cuttings from a non-woody portion of the plant and get them to root. Okay, so vegetative propagation. So this is the only way, this is cloning, the only way to get an exact replica of that parent plant. So this is what a lot of nurseries do. This is the quickest, easiest way. You already have the vegetative matter. They're just going to step up these plants from, a little, you see here, they've got little, I don't know, looks like a peat pellet, but it's not quite a peat pellet. And then they just step them up as they grow. So this is the quickest and easiest way for a lot of nurseries to get plants. So these are the true to type plants. And you can use this as a method of avoiding graft or bud incompatibility with stock. So without going into a lot of details on that, and a lot of fruit tree production, they use a particular type of root stock of the same species of, like, for instance, apples or pears or something like that, because they're going to have resistance to, say, nematodes or other things, but it's got to be compatible with that graft. If it's not going to complete that graft. It's not going to grow together. So you do have to keep that in mind. You have to graft something in the same family together. Here, you don't really have to worry about that because you're just taking a cutting, you're getting it to root, and then that grows and you step it up, and then eventually you sell the product. So what is a cutting? That's going to be your general term for vegetative propagation. So it's just synonymous with that. And it can be any type of that particular, you see that plant there. It can be any part of that or any portion. But it's got to contain a meristem. So that's going to be up there. You have at the very tippy top, you see the top of that growth where I've got the arrow and it says meristem. That's your apical meristem. That's where all the growing points are. So you have those at various locations. You've got one in the root system. You've got the one up at the top, and then you see you have those little buds off the branch, the main part of the branch there, the laterals. So those are the growing points. So if you prune that plant, one of those new growing points it's going to take over, and that's going to be the main growing point. So just you have to kind of keep those rules in mind when you're thinking of where can I prune this plant to get that cutting. So the types of cutting, you've got tip cuttings. So you can see there, that would be the top part. You've got node cuttings and stem cuttings. So that tip cutting is going to have that apical bud or the very first one or two nodes. Those nodes are the leaf nodes there that you see. And you can also do a stem section that's going to have one node or several nodes. So for instance, like a pothos, you can take a ton of sections off of one of the trailing stems off of a pothos plant. They're very, very easy to propagate, very easy. We take those all the time. Some of the master gardeners have been giving them away at some of the farmers markets because it's popular. Who doesn't want a free plant, right? Even if you already have 4 pothos at home, what's one more? So it's a very easy way to take cuttings and they root very quickly. You can take a paper cup, you could take a cutting, stick it in there, put it in a little plastic bag, wet the soil a little bit, and in like a week or two, you're going to have a rooted cutting of a plant. So, I mean, super easy. So here's an example of, this is a Cape Primrose, and you've got a tip cutting there and a node cutting. I know I showed it on the last one, but this is just what it looks like for the tip. So you've got the apical meristem there on that tip cutting, and then the node, so you have a lateral meristem there, which is going to be, you see it doesn't have the dominant, there'll probably have to be some pruning that goes into that node cutting. But they have the natural source hormones in that plant, those cuttings. So you're going to have, excuse me, you're going to have helping that adventitious root formation. Troubleshooting. So there's a lot of different ways that you can propagate those cuttings. So you can propagate them in water. A lot of us do this. If you don't have soil, you just stick it in a glass with water, and you can see there you've got a couple cuttings, and those have roots that have started to grow. They got to have good light though. So if you have a sunny window in your kitchen or something like that, that's a great place to put that. It can take anywhere from like a day where you might see a tiny little rootlet forming to up to a month. You want to make sure you keep that water level up. A lot of times people forget that inside in your house, your humidity levels are generally pretty low, like 40% maybe. So you want to make sure that you have plenty of water in there and that you're refilling that. I'm guilty of doing this with avocados. I forget to keep the water in the seed, and the dumb things, if they do germinate and I start to see a root, then they quickly dry up because I've forgotten to do that. So I've started just putting the seeds in a bag with some water and putting it on an indirect sunny windowsill. They do so much better. I have several of them now that have sprouts with leaves, and that's because I just left them in the bag so they stay wet all the time. One disadvantage of rooting cuttings in water is that those roots are going to be not quite as solid as something that's going to grow into soil or some other soilless rooting medium or soil. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And those water-rooted cuttings can have a little bit of transplant shock. So if you're hoping that they look beautiful and spectacular like they did in the plant or in the water, they may look a little rough for a while as they kind of get used to where they move to. All right, so basic rules of cutting. So taking the cutting, you want to take and cut that woody stem at an angle. Always cut at an angle, whether you're grafting or whether you're trying to root. And then make that smooth cut. You want to use either a pruning knife, use any type of sharp knife or clippers or something like that. Remove any flowering buds. You don't want that plant to flower. You're trying to conserve the energy so it goes into trying to root or graft. You don't want any flower buds. So to make that angle cut, you can see there, do it on the side of the closest bud, like you can see with those little red lines. Scratch or scrape the stem on the other side, the opposite side, okay? And what you're doing is you're wounding the plant so that you are getting it ready to start growing those adventitious roots. So you're going to expose, and you can see down there in that little diagram, you're exposing that cambium layer to the rooting hormones, and that's the layer that's going to generate those roots. So that makes sense, right? So taking the cutting, remove those bottom leaves and or cut off those bottom leaves in half to reduce transpiration. So you're trying to get that small plant to put all its energy into creating roots. You don't want it to put all its energy into making food. So you are cutting those leaves in half so that you remove some of that, some of those leaves, so that it then will put energy into getting those roots. So you do want to leave some of the leaf on there because those are going to provide hormones to initiate those roots, but you don't want all of them. Not to mention the fact that it increases the surface area, which is then additional area for transpiration or loss of water. So rooting hormones, they come in different types. So you've got your powder, like this. There it is. And then you also have liquid formulations. There's all sorts of types, like I've mentioned before. You can get them just about anywhere. You can get them online. You can make your own. I'm not going to give you the recipe for it, but it's probably online. So let's look a little bit at the science. I'm not going to go take a deep dive into it. But again, just going back to remind everybody, wounding that plant, that stem, is going to induce those hormones to form that cutting, to form the roots. So they're going to, those cells to form a tissue mass called a callus. So you can see there in the right-hand photo, that's a callus. So you've got all those roots that are kind of growing around there. It's got some soil and some sand and stuff that's in there, but that's where that wound was, and that's going to develop those adventitious roots. So that's why you wound it. So a lot of different woody ornamentals are propagated from cuttings. So you have to remember that there are right and wrong times to take them. And you've got to provide a great environment for that root, that adventitious root formation and development. So you could put a plastic, aerial root or adventitious root cover on it, like I was talking about. But if you don't keep that sphagnum moss wet, you're probably not going to get any roots. If you take it at the wrong time, when that plant is dormant, like the winter, you're probably not going to get any roots. So you've got to keep that in mind. Or pedalum, that's a one that's propagated from flexible younger wood. So you don't want the oldest stuff down on the bottom. You want new growth, basically. So you would want to take cuttings in June to September. So basically when it's growing. It would be slightly green to kind of brown, and basically that young growth in the spring is just too tender and it's not going to propagate very well. Azalea, another example, if you have a particular color that you really, really like, you can go out there and you can take cuttings. So this is how it's typically propagated. So when you see them in the nursery, and you get the same kinds of flowers every year, they're going to propagate this way. So if you want to do that yourself, or if your neighbor has an azalea that they really like, then you can go over there and take 4 to 6 inch cuttings from that upper part of the plant and wound that stem a little bit, and you too can make some cuttings. I will put that caveat in there. If you have named varieties, reblooming varieties, don't do that. If they are protected under the it's not copyright. That's my brain is blanking. But if it's a patented, there you go. It was the P word. If it's a patented cultivar, you can't. You're not supposed to take cuttings. So I have to put that in there. But if it is just an old heritage azalea, you can do that. There's no restrictions on that. All right. And so that is plant propagation in a really tiny little nutshell. So I do a whole bunch of different presentations. I usually do twice a month on Thursday evenings from 6 to 7. I said I was going to start adding in at least one lunch and learn per week, and those will be on Tuesdays. If I have them, usually in an off week from when I do the evening programs. And those are recorded and I stick them on the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. So I upload those there and you can watch them if you missed this or you came in part way and you want to catch the first part. If you know other Master Gardeners in other counties, please share that this is an extension provided program and it counts for CE, continuing education. That's a new requirement as of 2013. If you're not a Master Gardener, thank you for attending. We appreciate folks that want to learn, and that's what we're here for. We're here for education and outreach in Gwinnett County, and we try to help folks as best as we can. So we're also here for diagnostics and things like that. So if this is your first time attending, we appreciate that, and we can also help you with issues that you might have. There's several of us on the team here that are happy to do that. So if there are any questions, I'll take a look here in the chat. If you have a question, you can drop that in the chat. Let's see. When air layering, do you scrape the bark before wrapping? For best results, yes. So wounding is what promotes that adventitious growth, that adventitious root growth. So now you can do it. It takes longer. I think I mentioned that, but you can do it without scraping the bark, but you'll get a faster response if you do that. Anything else? I can't think I answered everybody's questions, but hopefully everybody learned a little something in the 45 minutes or so that you attended here with me. I tried not to go into too much detail. I know people want to go eat. All right. Oh, good. We've got some DeKalb Master Gardeners. So yes, and for those who maybe aren't a Master Gardener, or for those that have friends that are not, that want to be here in Gwinnett County, we are currently accepting applications for our next Master Gardener course through the end of September. We'll have a meet and greet on that last Friday, and you can get all of that information if you go to our UGAextension.org Gwinnett address there that you see up on the questions slide, and you can check it out. You can download that application there. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me at my email address. I'm happy to walk you through whatever questions you might have. But thank you for attending. And again, this will be up probably in the next week or so, I would think. So stop sharing and go ahead and end it. So Thanks, everybody.